Hey, so let's talk about diseases in the Indian community. So these are the Uchis, Wale Uchis, Gullah Geechees. But they said they had epidemic diseases. Now, and it's always funny, every time I find these, hidden tribe names I never knew was, this one's a soda pop name, you'll find out that they have a population of 6,000 and somehow went down to 3,000 and I think like 300 and they'll say like um yeah 300 over there and it'll say something like it was adverse effects of diseases was what really reduced the population. And even right here it talks about how the conditions, and this is the reorganization act, we talk about terrible diseases and death rates, crazy. Stuff like this smallpox attack and blankets. You hear it all the time, even on the live streams. But let's hear from an expert on what they say about diseases and the Indian population.
Open it up to any questions if you had any, or we can go to the next one. Thank you.
Had I known, I wouldn't have. I wondered, we all hear about Native Americans dying off quite a bit because of diseases, and I noticed you only mentioned one. I wondered where we were with that episode.
I wish I could give you a better answer than the answer I'm going to give you, and that is, I'm very cautious about disease and using disease to explain massive depopulation without some more written and archaeological evidence of it. The striking thing when you look at the colonial records, the 16th century especially, is there are very few references to large-scale epidemic disease. Elsewhere in the Indies, if you look at historical demography in central Mexico, in what becomes Colombia, New Granada, and Peru, when disease episodes like that happen, people write about them. Friars write about them, lay officials write about them. Everybody makes mention of these things. And right now, what's striking in the Florida example is how rare those references are to large-scale disease. And one of my worries about that sometimes is that disease can be used as a rather easy way to explain, to leave Native Americans out of the history. A kind of labor-saving device to talk about early Florida history as a European story without Native Americans. Native Americans outnumber Europeans throughout the entire colonial period. The entire colonial period. There are more than there are Spaniards. And we need to write them in, not leave them out and just dismiss them as, well, they all died. There weren't any left. They're all gone. And it's unfortunate that no one has really picked up on where Henry Dobbins kind of left off. We need some more rigorous historical demography. John and I have talked about these for even the Wale sites. It's very difficult because the Spaniards did not keep detailed census records. Now, if we find the mission records, that will change what we know about historical demography and will certainly give us a window into disease that we don't have right now. So it's not to say that there weren't massive episodes, but until I see better evidence of them, I'm cautious about saying, yeah, they're there. I think it's more interesting that they vastly outnumber Spaniards and how rare episodes like this are. Those military encounters between Spaniards and Native Americans are rare episodes. And we need to understand in a much more sophisticated way why.
You know who was getting diseases? When you come in here, the letter of Hernando de Soto, because they write about it. It says, on the 18th of October, the Adelantado, after a short-lived illness, he died. Sickness and insubordination followed in the army. The greater number of those died, perished by disease. They wrote about it. But who did they write about having diseases? Themselves, the Spaniards. Now, there's only gonna be one population on this land mass that outnumbers the Spaniards if they're Indians, right? Because as we know, the slave population numbers of what they call so-called black folks has been in the millions for a while. These are the so-called slaves. There's free blacks and mulattoes on another page. But these numbers would outnumber the Spaniards. Are you going to tell me that I know you're not going to tell me that the native population number that was just in 1900, right? Because this would have been, 1500. So they would have had to build up to 231,000. And remember, they can't use massive disease as an excuse. But 237,000 in 1900, you want to tell me that outnumbered the Spaniards? Because when you really look at this document, you get to see in 1850 how many black people were here in this document in 1850, and also how many people it was when they got to certain states after they went from the colonies, the East Coast, and started expanding into the Spanish area. For example, Louisiana. They didn't get into Louisiana until after the Louisiana Purchase, when they got it through and, took it from the Spanish, French, whatever. But when they got there was 34,000 so-called people who they labeled as slaves out of nowhere. Those would have been the black people who were there, melanated Indians, who were there when the Spaniards was there, outnumbering them. Because you can't tell me that these people were outnumbering anybody in 1900, let alone 1500, okay? And it's just crazy. It's funny because I've said this many times, and people try to say, I wouldn't leave out the fact that biological warfare could have been used. And I was just like, nah, what I actually said was, it's funny. Every one of these so-called natives that come on our live streams, they could say they from the South, they could say they from Canada, they could say they from Mexico. They could say any of those things. And you know what's so funny about that? They all got the same story. They all got the same diseases, like in smallpox blankets and stuff like that. And I was like, do you all not realize at some point we're going to think that's kind of idiotic? They was giving you diseases in 1500. They was giving you diseases in 1600. They moved west. They gave you diseases in 1700. You were still falling, succumbing to the diseases in the 1800s too. Whittling down your numbers, even though they said the Spaniards, you outnumbered the Spaniards. Yeah. And there's no proof. So now you all can go and screen record that. And anytime a person get up on your panel and say anything about disease in their population, ask them, hey, what happened to the numbers of your current population? Where disease? Go ahead and just play that. Just gently set it there on your screen for them from an expert.